Okay. Removal of the worm gear is a process of removing this retainer ring and then removing the gear, and then the worm gear can come out. As you can see, I've got a C-clamp around this. I'm clamping down on that end that has a lot of material that I can, it doesn't need a lot, you just don't want it moving. It makes it easier for you to engage and loosen this. I include in the kit what I call a special tool. It's just it's something that I made that finding a screwdriver that is this width is difficult, not impossible, but difficult. And so I found it easier just to make this special tool that fits into this groove that you can apply sufficient torque to loosen it. There is a retaining compound. I don't think it's Loctite, but you do need to defeat that. So the special tool is essentially just a hex bit that goes into a normal, most everybody has a screwdriver with different bits that you can plug into it. So inserting the special tool into the groove, make sure it's fully seated, push in while turning, and there you saw it starting to loosen. Okay, I hit a binding spot, so just a little bit more. Make sure you're pushing in. Go slowly, do not strip this out. So that is the kind of tension or pressure you'll need to apply to remove this ring. You can see it's a white compound, so that makes me think it's not Loctite. So we will set that aside in our parts dish. Let's see, we need to get the gear off, so I'll go ahead and loosen this C-clamp and turn this around. There are 2 grub screws, which I forgot to mention when I loosen this. So you do want to loosen both grub screws, but you can do that outside also. You don't have to do it. It's just a convenience thing. So as you can see now, the worm gear will come out most of the time with the bearings on it. And if it doesn't, no big deal. Sometimes that last bearing will get hung up there. I like to keep the orientation so I can look at this and study it to see how it was installed. Again, if you had problems and you're trying to diagnose problems and don't want to carry problems over, then you want to look at these assemblies and see if you can find out what caused your original problems, if there were any. So we'll clean off the grease here. We'll kind of look at the bearings. Just don't feel too bad. I don't feel any crunchiness. You don't want to be feeling dirt in the bearing, so to say, so that is how you remove a worm gear. Now this was the declination. right ascension is slightly different because of the PEC disc. So we'll go ahead and store this away. I'm going to write on it deck. And we'll write on this gear deck. We will go ahead and put this retainer back in so we know this is where it came from. Just finger tighten it back in. So that was deck. We'll go ahead and might as well label this worm deck also. Deck. So this, I'll go ahead and put the gear over here, and I'll put the motor and the PCB over in my parts bin. This is the right ascension assembly, and you can see it's got the PEC PCB on it. We can go ahead and take that off. 1.5 millimeter hex wrench, Allen wrench. I like to put a little piece of tape over those screws just to kind of keep them all in one. Let me go get my tape. Oh, and it is a good idea to take these shims off so you don't go and lose them. Put them into your parts bowl. Just because they're stuck on there doesn't, mean that they'll always be stuck on there, so to say. So do remove those and set them aside to a place that you'll remember where they are. So we'll just take a little bit of tape and so that these screws don't go falling out and get lost somewhere, and that way we know what those and how they were used and stuff like that. All right, the PEC disc is screwed in with this Phillips head screw. There is a 3D print out there. These can be fragile. I've seen these break. I've seen people break them. So there is a 3D print out there if you need to print a new PEC disc. This one almost feels like metal, but I don't think it is. That's why I keep kind of staring at it. It's like, is this metal? No, that's plastic, yeah. So set aside the PEC disc in a safer place, so to say, so that it doesn't get damaged or broken if you ever want to add PEC back. At this time, the kit does not bring PEC over. I'll look at it in the future if that's possible. With OnStep, it's possible. With this PCB and hooking it up to OnStep is the unknown. So I will have to make a new PCB, obviously, because it won't fit with the new motor. So that may be something that comes later on as I learn more about these mounts and how they work, etc. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same. We will clamp down this to the table. That's good. We will grab our special tool and we will now remove the capture ring off the RA. So again, get it in there, push in. Let's go ahead and put another turn on that, half a turn. And push in while turning. Make sure it's recentered, it's seated very well. And out comes the retaining nut. Again, it's a white compound. I haven't exactly identified what it is. So we got that out. Let's loosen up the other grub screw. As I said, there's two, and in my last video I only did one. So we will now crack the second one, and that one just popped real easy. It's not a big deal if you take, come on camera. It's not a big deal if you remove these grub screws outside or inside. It's just a matter of how you want to hold it and clamp it and stuff like that. So the only reason I really mentioned to do it while the bracket is still in there is because it's clamped in. So we will mark this gear as deck. No, RA. This is RA. Sorry. RA. If I said deck earlier, I do apologize. This is RA. RA. And this was already marked up. I really don't know what they were indicating. One, I think that's a 2, not a Z. 1205. Yeah, it had RA on it, but I kind of rubbed it off a little bit. Another reason why you should take pictures and shoot video is those kinds of things. If I were to rub that off during my disassembly, I'd be able to go back and review. So the RA gear, I'll put in my little parts bin. The worm gear will slide out. Sometimes the bearings will come with it, sometimes they won't. Sometimes you can poke it. I think we got crooked. There we go. And if that bearing doesn't want to come out, then that's fine, we'll put them back on. So now you can investigate this assembly if you want to. We'll clean up some of this excess grease. And we will label this one RA for right ascension. We'll feel the bearings, feel for crunchiness or grit. These actually feel really good. I don't know if these have been replaced in the past. These seem like a very high quality, I don't know why, very high compared to, let's see, what is deck? Hard to say. Come on, camera, focus. I don't think they were, as that sealant seemed very factory, so I would assume these are factory bearings. These do feel like they're in pretty good shape. Once we get it into the other assembly and spin it and listen and cleans things up, we'll find out if there's anything that we should be aware of. So this one, we will mark RA. Mark it in several areas as Sharpie does rub off, as there's still quite a bit of grease associated with all this stuff. Whoops, we forgot to put the retaining ring back in the RA motor assembly. So we'll just finger tighten that in. Okay, so that was it. That was removing. There's deck, and this is RA. This is what we'll need in order to transfer over to the stepper motor bracket. This is an example there's where we're at. So that's our next step, is we'll start looking at what has come with the kit and how we move things over, and we'll go from here. All right, the next steps in the assembly of the kit is to now transfer the worm gears into the supplied motor brackets for the stepper motors. These are exactly the same. There's no difference. I do like to label them. Go ahead and start designating which one is RA and which one is declination, so you can keep things organized. We have our worm gears still labeled as this one is declination and this one is RA. We've got 2 spacer washers, and we've got these set screws that we'll use to complete the assembly here. So we'll start with RA, and we'll use the RA worm gear. And this assembly just goes, oh, and one thing I thought I'd show, testing bearings. One way is to actually use this assembly and roll it back and forth and feel for any crunchiness. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that. If I don't, as long as I don't run over some bump on my mat. But they're smooth. You'll get a good feel, but you can take these and run them back and forth on a nice smooth surface and feel if you need to replace those bearings. Okay, back to assembly. So the longer side of the shaft goes into this side. So we'll go ahead and slide in the worm gear. The bearings go all the way in, seat all the way in, and we'll go ahead and I'll show you why there is a washer. I wanted to leave room for adjustment. I don't want things too tight, so anytime you can build in some adjustment point, that's good. So we'll go ahead and snug that down, doesn't have to be super tight. But the adjustment that I left is this. Axially, there is movement back and forth. And so with the washer, we'll be able to take that movement out. So we'll just slide this washer in there. We will put in our capture nut and bring this down, and this is where we start to get into our adjustment. Now, I'm not using Loctite at this time. We will. That's how, just like the Celestron was held in with a locking compound, we're gonna hold this capture nut in with a locking compound. So I'm just showing this to show the adjustment period without the Loctite applied. So if we now tighten this, we've taken out that axial play, but you'll notice it's very hard or harder to turn the worm. So this is where your adjustment comes in, as you now need to loosen the capture nut without gaining axial play and get a nice smooth spin on the worm gear. So that is a demonstration of that adjustment. Let's go ahead and do it for real. All right, and I include thread locker with the kit, and it's just a matter of snapping off the end. You can use that as the cap to put it back on. So what we will do, always give it a little shake, is apply a couple drops. So there's one drop, and we'll put it on the other side. Oop. Of course, my coordination is... This is not a permanent thread locker. This is a temporary. So having enough on there, there is really no front side, back side on these, I was just noticing. They both have surfaces that are okay to go up against the washer that's in here. So we applied our thread locker, and now we're going to thread this in. All right, so we'll tighten it back down to too tight. You can feel just a little bit of, this is not smooth. I got rid of my axial play, but it's just a little bit too tight. So it's very, very small adjustments. That feels pretty good. You can see I only turned that maybe a 16th or 32nd. Whoop, that was a lot. So let's see, did we gain? And you really got to kind of push. I don't feel anything. So this, let's go ahead and unloosen it some more until we get axe. Okay, now I can feel a little tiny clunk back and forth. So let's get rid of that axial play. Okay, I don't feel it there, and it is super smooth. I'm going to go just a little bit more. Still smooth, super smooth. No axial play. You're done. Let that cure. We'll go on and move on to the declination. And long side of the shaft first. Make sure everything's clean. I try to deburr things as best as I can. If you happen to see anything, please use a pick or something to clean it up. So in with the assembly. Make sure the bearings are nice and seated. This time I won't demonstrate without the washer. We'll go ahead and insert the washer because it's pretty much a known that we'll need it. Let's go ahead and test this before we apply the Loctite, just to make sure everything is feeling good. So that's really tight. That won't even turn. But we know everything is going together good, that we can now apply our thread locker. I think I mentioned this is a 1/4 inch Allen wrench. So we'll put a drop there, and we'll put a drop there. That's all you really need. Oh, now my assembly fell apart. I'll put it back together. Make sure everything feels good. We'll seat it down. Now we'll back it out. And it's always a good idea to seat it down tight-ish and then back it out just to make sure everything is seated well. There's nothing hung up. Okay, there I got my tiny bit of slop, or axial play. We'll go ahead and tighten this down about 1/8. And we got really nice spinning motion and no, I'm gonna go a little bit further. I think I felt, okay. I'd rather go a little bit tighter than looser if I had a choice. Go ahead and let the bearings kind of do their job. You don't want to put too much side pressure on these bearings, obviously, because they're not designed for that kind of load. But I'd rather have this to be on the tight side than the loose side. And that's feeling really good. All right. So now our RA that we have marked is assembled and our deck is assembled. While that Loctite is drying, we can now continue on with some more of the assembly.